Good evening. I was just reading something about Vincent Price, and so I maybe decide to do that. So in our last thing, we talked about using the Victor or the Lord of the Geniture, and I've been looking a lot at Lord of the Geniture and actually looking at the material around the Lord of the Geniture and getting a stronger idea of how to not specifically how to find it, but really how to come to making a judgment. I mean, so this is really what this type of astrology really is about, and what all astrology really is about how you put all of these factors together to come to some form of judgment. And so, what I found was that this particular book, which is called The Search of the Heart, which is where I realized that it was initially a horary technique, and I was have been using it quite a bit in I call consulta or what are called consultation charts. I decided to kind of go back and start looking at it, of course, within the context of what we had seen the last time, which is when we were using the three assistants, right? We were talking about the three assistants, which were the victor, which is the lord of the genitor, the high leg, and the karukuda, which is the alkakadan, also known as the alkakadan. But today I thought we would just maybe go down the line of a bunch of charts and look at how to come to a judgment about the Lord of the Genitor, because it's very often the case, and that's it's the case with any Al-Mubtaz situation, because that's what we're dealing with, an Al-Mubtaz or Al-Mutan situation. With any Al-Mutan situation, we're dealing with the fact that the possibility that the winner, the person, the planet who gets the most points, may not actually be able to function as the Al-Mubtaz as a result of maybe them being, like, for instance, we saw with Oprah Winfrey's chart. I think the Al-Mubtaz for her, or the Lord of the Genitor, should be actually Jupiter, or it might have been the ruler of the part of fortune or something, but we saw where it should have been Jupiter because it was in Pisces, but Venus was actually the winner. She had all of the points, and she was really the planet who could do all of the work. And we'll go back to her. We'll go back to her maybe later today, because she's one of the people listed that I've done the Lord of the Genitor for. Okay, so let's go into this. All right, so we've already talked about how to do it, right? How to find it. There are five dignities. We know what those are, right? The five dignities, and we know what the five chiefs are, right? We know what are the five chiefs, right? We know that it's going to be the sun. Is that somewhere here? It's going to be the sun, the moon, the part of fortune, the ascendant, and the new or full moon. It's from these five hylegical places. Those are called the hylegical places because they're all connected with light, and light is connected with life. And the high leg is basically what you use in primary directions to basically see what's going to happen to the life of the person. And so there's a whole, we've talked about finding the high leg, we've talked about finding the alkakadan, which basically then gives you the kind of an approximation of the length of the life. And today we're just going to look at the Lord of the Genitor, and we've seen the three assistants. We've seen that, but I thought we would look at it just as a standalone thing. And I don't, and um, I haven't yet come to a conclusion about what it actually means. What it actually or how, or where the actual. But that's what we're kind of here to do today. All right. So we know that we're looking at one of those five places. We know that we're taking an almutin of all of the five places. And so a great example to show you is the best thing to do is to have a spreadsheet. And you can see here, so if we're going to start with Ella Fitzgerald, I've got Jared Leto too. So we're going to start with Ella. So we can see that the sun is in 5 Taurus, moon at 27 Gemini, ascendant 19 Leo, part of fortune 19 Libra, 10 Libra, new moon or full moon 1 Taurus, right? All of these places are hylegical. These are the places, these are the two lights. This is where the sun becomes visible. This is the part of fortune, which is the distance of the two lights, what's the word, projected from the ascendant, and this is the previous new or full moon, so it's either no light or full light, right? So it's all about light with these hylegical places. Then, as we have talked about before, every degree has potentially five planets who have rulership in that degree. We're looking here, we have at the fifth degree of Taurus, we've got Venus. We've really only got three: Venus, Moon, and Mercury. Right? Is anywhere where we've got five: Venus, Moon, and Mercury. Okay, no. So it looks like we've got none of those have five, but potentially there can be five different planets, all with decreasing amounts of influence, right? Because domicile is obviously the strongest, exaltation next. I kind of go with this book where I give term more weight than triplicity, but for simplicity's sake, this is 5 points, 4 points, 3 points, 2 points, 1 point. In this book, term gets three and triplicity gets one, and I actually follow that, but I'm not going to ask you all to do so. Okay, do what you feel comfortable with, which is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Domicile, exaltation, triplicity, term, face. Okay, so that's understood. So just as you can find the Almuktas or winner, so we can see that Venus has 5 plus 3 plus 2, giving her 10 points, right? So she's obviously the winner. Moon gets 4 points, Mercury gets one. She's the winner, right? If she were in fucked up condition, maybe then we would have to look at the moon, right? Because she might not be able to really handle that, right? But so just as we can do that for five Taurus, we can take what's called a compound mutant of all of these points, all five of these places. And whoever wins, right? And you see, I've got all the totals here. And so basically what we would be looking at is we would be looking at the total by essential dignities, which we would get from our little chart here, the total by house total, right? So by the number of points by house. So 11 points belongs to the 10th house. So we know that Venus, Mercury, the Sun, Jupiter, those planets are 10th house planets, right? Right. So every house gets a score. Then the ruler of the day gets a score, the ruler of the hour gets a score. And so then we would basically all of those things together. Now, as I mentioned, just like we were talking about here, let's say Venus were in Virgo retrograde, right? She's the winner here and she's the winner here. She still wouldn't be able to operate she wouldn't be able to operate as the Lord of the Geniture because of her condition. So let's look at what he says to do, because he gives us a very good understanding. This is not Benatti, by the way. I think it might be Herman of Corinthia. Anyway, so it's here. Therefore, once the significator has been chosen, one will have to compare all of the places of the stars through the circle, and first one must note the one richer in dignities, then the one more powerful in strength, and finally the one more blessed by regard. And so I'm going to pause this for a second and go to the place where he talks about what they mean, because I know what you're thinking, because I was thinking it. Doesn't richer in dignities means the most powerful in strength? But it doesn't. And we'll get to that in a sec. Okay, so we're back with this idea of what are the 10 kinds of strength? Right. Now, we talked about this when we were doing our video thing on the 146 considerations. And for those of you who are interested in medieval astrology, you really want to maybe look at those videos. You certainly want to have the 146 considerations and be looking at them, because they give us the real kind of bare bones or skeleton of how we should be going about and reading things, how we should be looking at a planet, how we should be looking at a house, how we should be looking at the moon, what are the different configurations that we should be recognizing, right? All of those are in this section, right? Advancement, retreat. We've talked so much about advancement or retreat, application and separation, transfer, collection, right? All of these things which we mostly understand as horary, right? Borrowing, collection, transfer. We understand those mostly as horary terminology, right? So those of us who work with horary, we understand that. But reception, that's something we're using all the time, and I'm finding it more subtle and more fascinating all the time. This virtue, nature, counsel, these are all the different types of reception. Okay, so he's basically just kind of giving us what is this necessary bearings of the star, right? But then he talks about the 10 kinds of strengths. But so remember, the first thing we were going to look at is the richest in dignities, which we know how to do based on the essential dignities chart. Oh, do you hear the dog? Then and last night, my God, the dogs all fucking night long, so it might be an issue. Anyway, so next, this is it takes up a position regarding the East in a familiar way, meaning that it's basically is in a sign that aspects the ascendant, right? So that it's in an angle or a succeeding house or the ninth house that aspects the ascendant, right? And so that means not the eighth or second. All right. The 11th, certainly the fifth, absolutely right. Being in their own dignities, right? Which is the richness and dignity. Being direct, right? That's a strength. Being an impediment, one of the two major impediments in the 146 considerations are combustion and retrogradation. Being free of the assembly in regard of an infortune. This is really, now remember, assembly means what? Within 15 degrees. It's basically a conjunction. So basically, free of the assembly means a conjunction, but an assembly of more than two planets it only can happen within 15 degrees. So being free of the assembly, so conjunction and regard of an infortune. So a regard does can be a whole sign, can be a whole sign aspect, right? So it doesn't have to be an actual, it's from the square opposition, right? So doesn't have to be exact. It could be a whole sign square. It could be a whole sign opposition. Nor are the stars connecting to the stars which are remote or reverse. So in other words, not connecting to any star that is cadent or placed in their own fall, nor is a star itself in its own fall. Okay, so the planet can't be in its own fall, right? And it can't be connected to anybody that's in a cadent house or in its own fall. Now, as far as connected to a planet that's cadent, I don't know how so much of how I feel about that because you see that all the time. Being received, right? If it's being received, fantastic. Being Eastern, so for the sun, for east of the sun, we want the superior planets, Mars, Jupiter, well, rather Jupiter and Saturn to be up east, and we want the inferior planets to be west of the sun, right? And then anything else? I think there might be a few other. Yep, being in their domain, right? That's highs, right? That's highs or Heim. So the diurnal ones above the horizon in the day, and the nocturnal ones below the horizon at night, or whatever the opposite. Being in a sign of its own nature. So Mars for fire, Mars a hot and dry sign and hot dry signs, or hot and dry planet and hot and dry signs. Being in the heart with a strong sun. Now that's an interesting with a strong sun. So in Oprah Winfrey's chart, she's in the heart, but the sun is not strong. But I still think it seems to still be something that gives her some thing. And we're going to see another Casimir planet. We're going to see maybe two more Casimir, one or two more Casimir planets. So we get that idea now of what I'm talking about when he says richness and dignity, but then he also says strongest. And that's what he means when he says greatest in strength. Okay, and the third thing that he says is more blessed by regard. So the first was richer in dignities, right, which we know how to find based on this stuff. The second was more powerful in strength, which we just looked up. And then the third is more blessed by regard, right? And so blessed by regard obviously means that it's receiving trines or sextiles from benefics or squares with reception. At this point, it's becoming we should pretty much know. And the last thing from this before we go to the charts or go to the spreadsheet and the charts is this. Which, if it were found, it must not be rejected on account of the disadvantageousness of the places. It can indeed be remote and averse, but in the number of portions, it must be overflowing in both dignity and strength, in which case it obtains the high position of being the significator. Okay, so basically because he's saying if all we ever did was look at the succeedant or the angular ones, we would be limited. We would be too limited because often you'll find that the best planet, the planet that's got the strongest of the strongest condition, is not in the strongest house. right? So let's say it's Libra rising, you have a Pisces Venus in the sixth, right? She would be, if all the other conditions are there, she would be who we would use as the Lord of the Geniture. That's basically what it's saying. So it's saying don't limit it to only, don't do what you would usually do, which is look for the planet that is angular or succeedent or really angular and in good condition and blah blah blah. It doesn't matter. So in this particular case, our five hierarchical points, we're just going to start with Ella Fitzgerald, is are the sun at 4 degrees. And looking now, we've got this Venus in Taurus in Kazimi with the sun. And she's the ruler of the 10th as well. And you've also got the Jupiter here. You've got the Mercury here. Mercury, no, Venus is the ruler of the part of fortune too. I think Mercury is the ruler of the spirit. Yeah, Mercury is the ruler of the spirit. So you've got spirit and fortune both in this sign. And spirit, well, rather, fortune is exalted. I'm not exalted, but in its own domicile. And Kazimi spirit is relatively close to Jupiter. So all of this is very, 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 very potent stuff, right? So Sun is the first one, 5 Taurus. Moon is the second at 27 Gemini. The third, the ascendant, 19 Leo. 10 Libra, part of fortune. And then the previous new moon is the first degree of Taurus. So this is where the judgment part comes in, right? Because we're going to see who's the winner. This is Ella, right? So you can see from my calculations here that Venus has 25 points. The moon has 9, 13, Mercury has 13, Saturn is 11, Sun is 8, Jupiter 1. All right. Then, let's go to the chart for a second so you can get this idea of the scoring for the houses. So there are 12 houses, and the strongest house is the ascendant. All right. So 12, 11, all right, 10, 9. All right. So the strongest house is the first, then the 10th, then the 11th. So that's 12. 10 gets 11. 11th gets 10. Then we go across to 5, which gets 9. Then we go to 7, which gets 8. Then we go to 4, which gets 7. All right. Then from there, we go to 9, which gets 6, 3 that gets 5, 8 that gets 4, 8 get rather 8 gets wait 2 that gets 4, 8 that gets 3, 12 that gets 2, 6 that gets 1. Right? So you see how those oppositions work. So it's 12, 11, 10, 9. There's our first opposition. 8, 7. We finished the angles. Then 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay? So, going back to our spreadsheet, the Venus is also the hour ruler, the day ruler gets 7, the hour ruler gets 6. We talked about that already. So what we're looking for, all of the totals are the planet total, the house total, the day ruler total, the hour ruler total, and then everything together. Okay, the hour ruler gets 6 points, the day ruler gets 7. So Venus is the hour ruler, so she gets 36 plus 6. So I use both there. 36 plus 6 is 42. She's the obvious winner, right? She's the obvious winner as far as points is concerned. She does not have to be the winner. That's what the point I continue to make, right? Then we've got Moon gets 19, Mercury is 24, but he's the day ruler, so he gets 31. So he's next in line. Saturn at 13, Sun at 19, Jupiter at 12. So now we're going to look at what he said. First thing he said was richest in dignity. And of all of these that we've looked at, I mean, most of these planets are here. Of all the planets that we've looked at, right, because Mars is here. Mars is in the list, I think. Yeah, Mars. No, Mars is not in the list. So it's Venus, Moon, Mercury, Saturn, Sun, Jupiter. So 6, not 5. All right, it's not 7, rather. All right, so That means Mars cannot. We don't want to use Mars that because oh, here's a good point. So Mars is has got the strong dignity, but he's applying to the square of Saturn, and look, it's not a good reception. They are in mutual reception by fall. They are in mutual reception by fall. Even though this Mars is quite strong, he's in the fall of Saturn, and Saturn is in the fall of Mars. Okay, so that is that's a good example of not number three not being good, which is not well regarded, right? There's an okay regard from the moon here, right? From that sextile, but it's really this that fucks that up for him. So if we were to think of him, which we're not, that would fuck it up for him. Okay. But let's look at Venus. She's got the dignities we're talking about. As a matter of fact, this is not only her domicile, but it is her term and her triplicity. So she gets, what did I say, 10 points? She gets 5 plus 5, 5 plus 2 plus 3, 5. So she has 10 points of dignity already. She's strong as fuck. She's within 8 degrees of the ascendant. I've read some places where they would give 3 degrees before the 12th house, 5 degrees before the cusp of the fifth, and 8 degrees before the cusp of an angle. Because Venus is the ruler of the 10th house, and I mean everything about her life is so Venusian, and Taurus ruling the throat and singing, and the Mercury is the significator for the voice, and he's also the significator of voice by being the ruler of the second house. So I'm just going to I just decided, even though technically these are really in the ninth, they're not. I usually use the 5 degree rule, but I'm going to go outside of it for Ella for just this case because of how it showed, because of how it seems to show in the life. This Kazumi is very, very clear. This Kazumi is very, very. You can see in the life. Basically, you can see in this person's life. It is very much the greatest. I was listening to some album of hers that was live, and the MC comes on and he goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, simply the greatest, Ella Fitzgerald." And this is 1956. We're not talking about after years and years and well, it is already years. What, 18 years, 22 years she's been in the business already, but not, in the television era where we would see her on these award shows and variety shows and whatnot. Okay, so it looks like Venus is I mean, who else could it be? Mercury had almost as many points. He's very strong. He's at the end of Taurus. He's in Saturn's term and Saturn's face. So no, Mercury doesn't really have any kind of strength here, but of dignity. But he's got the strength of where he is. He's getting the sextile of the Saturn. Both of these are now getting the sextile, which we don't. Right, it said if it's getting any kind of regard from an opposition or a square, so we don't have that happening. So Venus is the obvious. Not only is she the winner by points, but she's the one that makes the most sense. She's Kazumi. She's the ruler of the 10th, very close to the 10th, and she's in her domicile, triplicity, and term. All right, so that's Ella Fitzgerald. This fucker who's ruining the fucking country. So, and once again, if you're a fucking Trumper, you can kiss my ass. Get the fuck off of my channel. The last time I did that, somebody had the nerve to write, "Oh, I'm leaving. You said something about Trump." It's like, motherfucker, this is not an airport. You do not need to announce your exit. Just leave silently. Get the fuck out of here. So, anyway, so this asshole, let's see. So we're looking for, so what are the five places? Sun, 20 through Gemini. Oh, that's at the opposition, 22 Sag. 30 Leo. Remember when we talked about this? We were talking about what makes a billionaire, and we were seeing a lot, almost many of these billionaires had fixed stars, very close to fixed stars on their ascendant. What a part of fortune. 29. I see this all the time in these famous people's chart. 29th degree of Aquarius. I don't know why, but I'm seeing it everywhere. And then it might just be me. It could be me. It might not be a symbol of fame. It could just be something, it could, every now and then you get to a certain place with these charts and they start telling you, giving you messages. All right. And it's a previous new moon, right? So it's 24, 25 Scorpio. So let's look. Oh, did I screw? All right, so let's look. All right, this asshole. Let's find him. Okay, so we can see it's kind of neck and neck with all the planets as far as just the planetary points, right? Saturn wins as far as the planetary points, but he's in the 12th house, which only gets 2 points. So it doesn't put him that close, that further in the running. Look at how Mercury has 10 points, but he's in the 11th, so that gives him 10 points with that. So you see how sometimes you'll have these big points, but they'll be in shitty houses, right? So that's kind of what he was referring to. So Mercury gets 20, Saturn gets 16. It looks like the day ruler isn't here, but Jupiter is the hour ruler. Mars gets 19, Sun gets 20, Moon gets 8, 13, 19. So then Jupiter gets 19. So once again, everybody's kind of neck and neck. The winners are Mercury and the Sun, followed next by Mars and Jupiter. All right, so let's look at that. What is it? Mercury and the Sun, followed by Mars and Jupiter. Those are the four we're going to look at. Okay, Mercury is Peregrine, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, Mercury is Peregrine, in a good house, and, but in assembly within 15 degrees of Saturn. Right, so that's but I mean, except for the fact that he's in the 11th, not that much to him, right? Mars, wait, Mercury and the Sun. The Sun, of course, is right on the cusp of the 11th, good place. He's in it. He's in his highs, right? He's a daytime planet in a masculine sign above the horizon, so that's a strength for him too. He does not have, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think he has any. Oh yes, he's in his face. That's the only dignity he has. So, and he's with Rahu, which can be good for when the sun is acting as a benefic. Rahu can be good. Um, so sun is a possibility, right? Sun is a possibility, but I like this one better, and it's because not only is it angular and it's very close to the fixed star, but Mars is the ruler of the term and face here, if I'm not mistaken, Leo. Yep, 20, yep. Mars is the ruler of the term and the face, giving him, Sun only has 1 point, but Mars has three. And now there's that, and then there's the reception with the sun. The sun is being, Mars is being received by the sun. The sun's not being received by, wait, yeah, the sun is receiving Mars. Mars is not receiving the sun. So actually, so if I were, we could have used the sun and been like, oh yeah, well, the sun's applying to a planet that's in his sign. That's another form of reception. But that means that the sun is receiving Mars, not that Mars is receiving the sun. In order for Mars to be receiving the sun, sun should have been in Aries, right? And applying. Then you would have a mutual reception, right? Because sun would receive Mars from Leo, and Mars would receive sun from Aries, right? Okay, but that's not what we have. So I think, matter of fact, I know that this is the case. Now think about these two people. Think about Ella Fitzgerald's Casimir, highly dignified Venus, and think about this motherfucker and his violent rages and the chaos that he creates, the belligerence, his disgusting belligerence and nastiness and vindictiveness, and think about how the Mars, how that's and egotism. narcissism and egotism, the sun, and it's the sun Mars. So it's a belligerence, aggression, narcissism, egotism all together, right? So we can see. So it looks like it's kind of a, shall we say, it's almost like it's a shining, it's a beacon of who they are for everyone to see on a certain level. And let's go to Jared Leto next because that's an even more interesting. Where is that fucker? Yeah, that's an even more interesting expression of this. Okay, so our what are our five? Five Capricorn, there's the moon, 29 Aries. This is really close to my chart. 5 Capricorn, 29 Aries, 25 Taurus, part of fortune, 19 Virgo, and what is it? Previous new. And 26 Sagittarius. That's my ascendant. This is my moon. This is my sun. Right? So, okay, so going to Jared. All right. So you can see because he's got Saturn in the first, that pushes Saturn kind of far up. That's going to make him almost the winner. But Venus is close because she's right on the cusp of the 10th. Mars is in the 11th, right? Which is great for him. So, and then the day ruler is Sun and the hour ruler is Venus again. So we're coming back to Venus. So, so, so these are relatively close too, except we've got some obvious losers, right? We've got Jupiter and the Moon are obviously not in the running, but it looks like Venus, Mars, Saturn, Mars, and Mercury are the most important. Venus, Saturn, Mars, and Mercury. Now, of course, I've already shown you which one I chose, but I want to. We're really what we're doing is looking at the judgment. We're looking at how to make a judgment. Saturn is retrograde, right? So he can't happen. Venus is with Rahu, which isn't bad, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's good. She's angular. She's not in her term. She's in Mercury's term, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, she's in Mercury's term, but she's in a good position. She's receiving she's actually received by her owner, by her spouse. There's a sextile here, the sextile there, sextile when you by whole sign here, sextile by whole sign all over, but sextile by whole sign over here. So she's in pretty good. She's not that. She wouldn't be a bad one to choose, right? But she's not as strong as this planet. And what do they say? The dignities, best in dignity, strongest. Look, it's getting the whole sign. It's getting these whole sign trines from Jupiter and Mercury. It's in it. It's just the sun is just separated from him, and there's a mutual reception by exaltation. Sun is in Capricorn, Mars is in Aries. There's a sextile. Matter of fact, Mars is applying to Saturn. It's about almost exact. It's partile and almost exact. So I think it's this. It's Mars. It's obviously Mars. And those of you who don't know, what's interesting about this 10th house thing, right? It's Aquarius on the 10th house with the ruler of the 10th and the first in Gemini. And Jared Leto is one of the few artists who has pursued two equally successful careers, one as an actor and the other as a member of a band that's called 30 Seconds to Mars, where he has basically facilitated, and I'm gonna go further into Jared Leto because he is fucking interesting as hell. Where he has basically facilitated the his transformation into a cult figure. And he's got a group called an echelon. An echelon is actually a military term. And he's got a place called Camp Mars, where his echelon comes to an island and does these retreats with him. And it's Camp Mars, and what's the one Camp Mars and Island Mars, or so there's a few different kind of Club Mars, Camp Mars. Yeah, so very Very interesting. We'll do one more. But so once again, a beacon of who they kind of, and it looks like it's public. It looks like it's almost as public as what we think the tenth house is supposed to be, right? It's like it's a something that can encapsulate them to a certain level on a publicly. The like, I mean, all of these people are public figures, right? So it's something that it's like a signature of their public life. So far, we've seen. The last person I want to do is Chris Farley. I've been, you can tell that I've been, I guess, going into these silly, I've been, well, not silly, because at first it seemed kind of silly, but then it was like, hey, this is actually great fodder for astrology work. So I've been listening to all these basically YouTube videos about whatever happened to so and how so and so's life went to this and how blah blah blah. Chris Farley is a really really sad fucking story and a very typical tale of for comedians, etc. And just such a balls to the wall type human being. So self destructive. So I mean, and his idol was John Belushi, who I think they both died at around the same age, and pretty much the same kind of overdose type situation. Anyway, so 27 Aquarius, 26 Pisces, 6 Aries, 6 Libra, Leo, sorry, excuse me, 5 Virgo, and then the new moon is 24 Aquarius. Okay, so yeah, I mean, after it's funny because if I weren't into astrology, I'd feel like I was wasting my fucking time. But since I am, and I have maybe come to a new understanding about something. This is, I think, the reason I'm going to do this one, this is the last one we're going to do, is because this might be the hardest one to come to the judgment about. Okay, so you can see that as far as intrinsically, Saturn has the most points, but he's in a shitty house. He's in the eighth house, right? So he's the day ruler, so he's the winner. He gets 33 points. Looks we've got Jupiter in the 10th. Everybody else is in kind of shitty houses. This is what the seventh house, Mercury in the seventh. So it looks like the real possibilities or the main possibilities are Saturn, Jupiter, Mercury, or Mars. Right? Saturn, Jupiter, Mercury, or Mars. This one gave me some pause. I really had difficulty with this. But and I even have maybe changed my mind. You'll see there that I put Mercury, and I'll tell you what. But I don't know if I really believe that. I think something else. Okay, so we said Saturn, Jupiter, Mercury, Mars, right? Now look at how Saturn is the richest in dignity. Right? He's the richest in dignity of all of these planets. It's daytime. These planets, Jupiter and Mercury, are both in their triplicity, but it's daytime. But that's they still, as far as I'm concerned, get they wouldn't get it in the chart, but intrinsically for themselves, they do get it. Um, so was like, I don't like that. Why? Because look, he's in assembly with these malefics, right? He's combust and he's with Mars, right? That's shitty for Saturn. So he's not so number one is cool. He's the cusp of the eighth. He's in a succeeding house, but it's not one that aspects the sun. Remember, we wanted that. So so I said no to the Saturn, and actually that's maybe going to affect my new choice. Then I thought, well, maybe it's Jupiter, right? Jupiter's on the cusp of the 10th. He's angular, and he's receiving, he's getting this basically the regard is the sextile regard from all these planets, which I thought that's not so bad, even though it's the malefics, but this malefic is strong, right? So I thought, well, maybe it's the Jupiter. I might go with the Jupiter. But then I thought, well, wait, why? It should really be the Mercury, because if we look at it, Mercury is not connected to these planets. He's 18 degrees away from Saturn, right? So he's nowhere near, not in any kind of assembly, and he's receiving the sextile from Jupiter, right? Jupiter's getting this stuff, but Mercury is actually getting this stuff, this Venus Jupiter stuff. And I thought, okay, makes the most sense as far as I'm concerned. That makes the most sense to me. Right? He's not as strong as the Saturn, but Saturn can't really function because of this. We haven't. Who haven't we talked about? We haven't talked about Mars. Note, Mars is Casimir. But what did they say? Casimir with a strong sun. I thought maybe I might change it to Mars because Mars is. I was thinking originally that I'd change it to Mars because Mars is Casimir. Mars is received by his ruler. But then also Mars would be in the eighth house, which would be a house that doesn't aspect the sun, even though he's in a sign that does aspect the ascendant. Mars is in a sign that aspects the ascendant, but technically in a house that does not. So it could still happen. Now, when we think about Chris Farley, we think spaz, right? We think like extremes, as a matter of fact, this particular video was called "The Guy Who Would Do Anything for a Laugh," right? So just no boundaries of any kind, no boundaries of any kind. Maybe we don't need to use Mars. Maybe it is the Jupiter. Maybe it is the Jupiter because the Jupiter is in Aries. No boundaries, right? Jupiter has to do with boundaries. This moon is in Pisces, right? I mean, for me, I think from looking at this video, I never really followed him, but I think about that first Saturday Night Live thing where he throws himself on the table, and and it just, he just basically throws himself on a cocktail table and it goes to the floor, So I think of that kind of thing and weird comedy. Now, here's the thing, though, too. Venus is Mirth traditionally with medieval astrology, which means that if we use the Mercury, then it would be a Venus Mercury thing, which would fit with comedy, but it also fits if we use the Jupiter, right? But I think I'm going to stay with what I was thinking about, which is the Mercury. But see what I'm so you see, so this is where it gets dicey, and since we've seen with the other ones what it should be saying, right? What it's looking like it's saying, right? We just looked at Ella, we just looked at Jared Leto, we just looked at, I don't know, Donald Trump, right? What it should be saying, it should be something we can all see that's like a signature of sorts. And so I'm actually really leaning towards the Jupiter because of also the weight. Jupiter is big, expands large. He was known as the fat guy. And since it is 12, 10, 11, 9, 8, maybe that's giving him the edge. Maybe that's giving Jupiter, and that would also then give him a little bit of a reception from Mars, right? Mars receives Jupiter from his uh, domicile. So maybe I've changed my mind and I think it's the Jupiter. I think the Jupiter makes more sense. The lack of boundaries, the weight, and the Venus. I'm always calling Venus Jupiter too much of a good thing. And this guy seems like he was like appetite on wheels. So which is Moon and Venus are the appetite planets. And note that Venus and Jupiter are both the rulers of Pisces. Moon is in Pisces, and I always say when I see Venus and Jupiter together, or an aspect or whatever, and they're not that close, but they're in the same sign together, I always say what part of their life is out of control, and that means that this moon would be out of control, right? Because Venus Jupiter leads to addiction and to basically falling into a trap where there are things that you love become a prison of sorts, or can become, where, like I say, too much of a good thing. All right, so that's judgment. That's coming to judgments around the Lord of the Genitor, and you can see how dicey it can get, how difficult, how discerning you have